Welcome everybody. We're back here for another study. Today we're going to be in the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to be in chapter 8 of the Gospel of Matthew. As you can see, got the Bible out here. You know what to do. If you do not, you get yours out, set it before you so you can follow along in whatever version that you have. And we will look at this for ourselves here together. And we'll see where the Lord leads us as we go forward from here. We're going to be in Matthew 8, going to start in verse 5, and then we're going to read through the entirety of this story here. There's different sections here in chapter 8. This is one section. We'll read the entirety of that section. Eventually, Jesus came to a little town of Capernaum. In Capernaum, a military officer came to him and asked him for help. "Lord, I have a servant who is lying at home in agony, paralyzed." Jesus says, "I will come to your house and I will heal him." "Lord, I don't deserve to have you in my house. And in truth, I know you don't need to be with my servant to heal him. Just say the word and he will be healed. That, after all, is how authority works. My troops obey me, whether I am next to them or not. Similarly, the sickness will obey you." Jesus was stunned by the depth of the officer's faith. I guess we'll stop right there for a minute and just kind of take a look at what we've got here, just so that we're kind of building our understanding as we go along here. We started in verse 5. Jesus comes to Capernaum. It's a little town up in Galilee. It's north of Jerusalem. A military officer comes to him and asks him for help. Now, this area is all underneath the domination of the Roman Empire. So this is a Roman soldier, somebody who's within that authority structure. There would have been a high degree of expectation for that Roman soldier to be devoted entirely to Caesar, the emperor. Because in the Roman thought, Caesar, whoever the Caesar was at that time, he would have been worshipped. He would have been thought to be divine because that built on his power, his prestige, and the whole fear angle of, hey, you're coming up against a god, for his enemies, that whole thing. But this military officer searches Jesus out. Because we don't know where he was stationed or where he lived. It was somewhere near here. But he searches Jesus out. Now think about that. He is a Roman military officer. He is not somebody who's going and worshiping with the believers. It's not very likely. There would have been a huge stigma about that, because then people would have said, aha. Because Christians in that, remember, during this time, they're viewed as part of the rebellion. They're just, the time Jesus is here, they're just another Jewish sect. The Jews are not to be trusted, that whole line of thinking. But this military officer seeks Jesus out. There's a reason that he seeks them out. He may have had some contact with Jesus where he saw Jesus do things, because he could stand off and watch, and he could have seen things. That's a possibility. More than likely, what's happened is, in his daily life with his servants and the people that are in his command, he's come in contact with believers. He's seen how they act, he's seen what they say, heard what they say, followed up on it, checked it out for himself, to the extent that he knows, I have an issue, I can't solve it, I need this servant. Servants are he thinks the servant is valuable. I want something done, I can't do it. I'm going to go to somebody who can. And because of his contact with the believers, because of perhaps him seeing Jesus do things before, he searches Jesus out for this very purpose. Tells him about his servant. Jesus says, no problem, I'll come right to your house, because that's who Jesus is. He's like, doesn't bother me, you're a Roman. You came to me for help. You asked me, so I will come. And the Roman officer says, wait, he's kind of, you don't understand who I am? I'm not that good a person. I'm a Roman military officer. We do bad things. That's why he says, I don't deserve to have you in my house. And then he recognizes Jesus' authority in all this, because he has been led, because of his curiosity of hearing about what the believers had to say, perhaps seeing Jesus act himself. He has been thinking through in his mind here who this Jesus could be, and come to the conclusion that Jesus is a man with authority. That's why he goes through this in verse 9, that after all is how authority works. My troops obey me whether I am next to them or not. Similarly, the sickness will obey you, because he believes that's the level of authority that Jesus has. Jesus, in verse 10, Jesus is stunned by the depth of the officer's faith. He looks to those followers who are following Jesus here. This is the plain truth. I have not met a single person in Israel with as much faith as this officer. It will not be just the children of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob who celebrate at their heavenly banquet at the end of time. No, people will come from the east and the west, and those who recognize me, regardless of their lineage, will sit with me at that feast. But those who have feigned their faith will be cast out into outer darkness, where people weep and grind their teeth. Big statement, because today, as in Jesus' day, the Jews believe we're God's chosen people. Except for, if you go back in the Old Testament, the whole purpose of them being God's chosen people isn't to pat their fanny. They're to be a light, a witness to the world of who God is and how God works, to draw them to God as well. That was the whole point. That was why that was one of the reasons God would be so upset when they would turn away from God, because they're pushing people away from God. Here, Jesus makes it real clear. There's going to be more than just Jews who come home with me. Verse 12, but those who have feigned their faith. What Jesus is talking about here, those who have just went through the motions and said, well, for us today, I've gone to church. I was there on Sunday. They had a midweek service. I was there. We had a church picnic. Well, I was there. I give money. I help out. They had a clothing drive or a food drive. I gave to that, Jesus said, if you're just going through the motions, you may think that you punched your ticket, you got it, but you do not determine that, Jesus says. I determine that. And I'm telling you, going through the motions won't cut it. And he said, those people, they didn't really want anything to do with me. They will be cast into the outer darkness. Jesus turns to the centurion. You may go home, for it is as you say it is as you believe. And the officer's servant was healed right then. Now, we have Jesus' word that the servant is healed, so we can readily take for granted then this military officer goes home. We don't know if he came alone. I don't know that. You don't know that. It doesn't tell us that. But he goes home. And no doubt, Jesus said he was going to be fine. He's fine. His servant is fine. He's been healed. He's going to go and find his servant healed. Now, he's already, before he ever personally met Jesus, been curious about God, curious about Jesus, come to the determination that Jesus has authority because he is this great person. He is somebody with authority. He doesn't know everything there is to know about Jesus yet. But Jesus healed his servant because of the military officer's faith. It wasn't that faith of the servant, it was the faith of the military officer coming saying, hey, this is my servant. He is in my charge. I am bound to take care of him. And I'm asking you because I know you can take care of this. I know it. So he comes and Jesus takes care of that. The question for you and I then is, because no doubt in my mind, shouldn't be any doubt really in yours, the Christians that this military officer came in contact with before, he didn't go and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. So they all know this military guy. None of them would even know. When he was looking at Jesus from afar, we don't know if Jesus even knew that he was there in the crowd. Jesus' attention would have been all over. We know God knows all things, but Jesus is the God-man. There's things Jesus does not know when he is in the flesh, because he tells us, even those times only the Father knows, because his knowledge is limited when he is here in the flesh. But the point here, more importantly, is those believers that this military officer came in contact with helped him make the decision of who Jesus is. Jesus' own example helped him make the decision of who Jesus is. The question back to you and I then, because this is how these studies work, what's our example telling people? Does our example, does anything that we're doing lead people to consider Christ? Does anything? I'm not going to fluff this all up for you and pat your fanny. It's not the point here. Bible doesn't do it. God doesn't do it. I'm not going to do it either. Does anything that you or I are doing lead people to God, to Christ? Does anything? That is the question for you and for me this coming week. And I will see you next time.